Let's start solving Test 3, Passage 1 of IELTS Reading Academic from Cambridge, Book 19. The heading of the passage is Archaeologists Discover Evidence of Prehistoric Island Settlers. Let's understand the heading. Archaeologists are people who dig in the ground to find old things, to learn about how people lived long ago. Prehistoric means a very long time ago, before written history. Island settlers would refer to people who moved to and lived on an island a long time ago. So the heading refers to scientists having found evidence that people lived on an island a very long time ago. The first question type is true, false, not given. The answers to these questions are in the same order as the information in the text. A step by step strategy for solving true, false, not given questions is that we do one question at a time. We look for location keywords in questions. Location keywords could be words like names, dates, etc., which are easy to locate when we scan the passage. Once we have the tentative location of the answer in the passage, we read a question carefully, figure out the answer by reading that part of the passage, and move on to the next question. This is the rule that we apply when confirming whether an answer is true or false or not given. If even one word of the statement is false, the answer would be false. If we cannot say either false or true for a question because we don't have enough information in the passage, the answer is not given. Let's start with the first question. The first question has capitalized words Obi and Seri Shipton and his colleagues. Both are mentioned in the first sentence of the passage. Seri Shipton and his colleagues are archaeologists. The question says that before they arrived on the island named Obi, some other researchers, some other archaeologists had already studied the island. So, the information that we are looking for in the question is, did Seri Shipton and his colleagues do research on the island of Obi? Had other researchers done research or not? If the answer is yes to all of these questions, the answer would be true. If the answer is either false or not given to even one of these three questions, the answer would be false or not given, respectively. The first sentence of the passage says Dr. Seri Shipton and his colleagues became the first archaeologists to explore Obi. So, did Seri Shipton and his colleagues do research? Yes. Were they first one? Yes, they were. Had other people done research? No, they had not. So, archaeological research had not taken place before the arrival of Seri Shipton and his colleagues. The answer to the first question is false. The confusion could be that earlier research is mentioned in the second paragraph. But this earlier research is not archaeological research. Archaeological research was done for the first time by Seri Shipton and his colleagues. Let's start with the second question. It has a capitalized word kilo, which can help us locate the answer in the passage. And there are other words like clam, shell, and axis, which are also words which may not have any synonyms, and we may be able to find them in the passage. We found the answer to the first question in the first paragraph. Kilo is mentioned in the third paragraph, and kilo site is mentioned in the fourth paragraph. So we can be certain that no answer is from the second paragraph, and for now we can skip this paragraph. Let's understand the question. A site is a place where something happens or is found. In archaeology, a site is a location or a place where researchers or archaeologists dig to find old objects. The kilo sites would mean places in the kilo region where researchers were digging and studying old objects. Clam is a sea animal. Clam shell is the outer covering of a clam. Clamshell axe would mean ancient tools made from clamshells, which are shaped like an axe. The question means that in the Kilo region, researchers found clamshell axes, and these clamshell axes were the first ones found in the region or in that area. Before this, no one had found clamshell axes in that area. The fourth para mentions the exact phrase kilo site, which is mentioned in the question. But kilo site just means a location or a place in the kilo region. So the mention of prehistoric shelters in kilo from paragraph 3 would also refer to archaeological sites in kilo region. And paragraph 3 also mentions axes and clamshells. So we can be sure that the answer is from the third paragraph. Meanings of some of the words from the paragraph are on the screen. We will focus on the part of the paragraph which mentions clamshell axes. The earliest axes at Hilo were made using clamshells. So the first axes, 14,000 years ago, were made of clamshells. But then it says that clamshell axes had also previously been found elsewhere in this region. This region is the Kilo region. Found elsewhere means found somewhere else. Previously means before. So if clamshell axes had been found at some kilo sites before, this part is false. So the answer to the second question is false. What could confuse you is mention of the island of Gebe. It may seem that the axes found before or previously were from Gebe and not Kilo. But in this region, here refers to the Kilo region. And Gebe Islands are part of the Kilo region, which is explained here. So the answer to the second question is false. Let's start with the third question. To locate the answer of this question, we need to search for the number 18,000. 18,000 is mentioned in the fourth paragraph. The question says the size of Obi today is less than it was 18,000 years ago. Obi is an island. If the size of the island has reduced, the answer is true. If it has not reduced, the answer is false. The whole paragraph is talking about what Obi was like 18,000 years ago. It mentions the climate, rainforests, sea levels, and then it says Obi was a much larger island, which means it was larger then, now it is smaller. Back then, 18,000 years ago, it encompassed or it included other islands which are now separate islands. So, Obi was a larger island in the past, which means today it is smaller or its size is less. So, the answer to the third question is true. Moving on to the fourth question. To locate the fourth question, we need to find the number 11,700. The answer to the third question was at the end of the fourth paragraph. This number is mentioned at the beginning of the fifth paragraph. The question means that 11,700 years ago, there was a change in the climate. The effect or the impact of this change in the climate was more on OB than on the islands nearby. In the passage, it says that 11,700 years ago, the climate became significantly warmer and wetter. This means that climate changed. After this, the impact of this change on OB is mentioned. The jungle became thicker. There is some mention of how the axis changed. So, according to the passage, there is a mention of change in climate around 11,700 years ago. This change was in OB, but there is no mention of the effect or the impact being more on OB or less on the other islands. There is no mention of the climate change in other islands, and there is no mention of any comparison. So, this information is not given. So, the answer to the fourth question is not given because we have no comparison of the impact of climate change on different islands. We just have a mention of climate change. The fifth question mentions axes, and there is a mention of warmer, wetter weather. We saw a mention of warmer and wetter climate or weather at the beginning of the fifth paragraph when looking for the answer to the previous question. The question means that the weather became warmer and wetter, and the material used to make axes changed. Researchers believe that these two things are linked. There is some connection between the change in weather and the material of axes used. In the passage, it says the climate became significantly warmer and wetter. So, the warmer and wetter weather part of the question is correct. Then it mentions that because of the warmer and wetter climate, the jungle became thicker. It is no coincidence, means it did not happen by chance, which means there was a reason for it. There was a reason that at this time axes were made from stone and not from seashells. When solving the second question, we talked about axes made of clam shells. Here it is mentioned that there was a change and now the axes were made from or crafted from stone. This change in the material of axes was because the forest had become dense or the forest had become thick, and the sharp edge of the stone axe was required. So, there is a connection between the warmer and wetter weather and the material of axes. Because of this change in the weather or climate, the jungle became thicker. Because of it, stone axes were required to clear the jungle. The answer to the fifth question is true. The sixth question has a name, Shipton. We found the answer to the previous question, the fifth question, in the fifth paragraph. Shipton's team is mentioned in the seventh paragraph. So we can skip the sixth paragraph. The question means that Shipton's team found evidence related to how people of Obi Island hunted. And Shipton's team was surprised by what they found. It says here Shipton's team's excavation unearthed a volcanic glass substance called obsidian. And then it goes on to talk about other things like beads. There is no mention of hunting in this paragraph? So the answer is not given. What could be confusing, however, is that in paragraphs 6 and 8, hunting is mentioned. In paragraph 6, it says the researchers, which could make you think that it's talking about Shipton's team. Find evidence means unearthed, but this evidence was not found by Shipton's team. The only paragraph in the passage which mentions Shipton is paragraph 7. There is no mention of any evidence being found about hunting practices by Shipton's team. So the answer to the sixth question is not given. Moving on to the seventh question. Seventh question mentions the Kilo region, which we have read about before in the second question as well. Here, the shelters in Kilo are mentioned and 1,000 years is also mentioned. So these are the two things we keep in mind. The answer to the sixth question was from paragraph 7. 1,000 years is mentioned in paragraph 9. And paragraph 9 also mentions kilo shelters. So this is where we start looking for our answer. The question means that before 1,000 years ago, someone was always living in the shelters. There was never a time before this time when they were unoccupied. In paragraph 9, it says there is no evidence for use of keto shelters after this time until about 1,000 years ago. What this tells us is that we are talking about some time before 1,000 years ago, and from this time, there is no evidence that anyone was living there. This tells us that there was some time period before this when no one was living there. From only this information, we can figure out that the answer is false. However, if we go to the previous paragraph, that is paragraph 8, we see that there is a clear mention that people lived in these shelters around 10,000 years ago. Around 8,000 years ago, the shelters were abandoned. That is, they were left empty. So, between 8,000 years ago and 1,000 years ago, no one was living in these shelters, which means they were not occupied continuously. The answer to the seventh question is false. What I found confusing about this question is that it took me a little while to understand exactly what the question is saying, which is why I have made this timeline to depict what it says. I hope it helped you understand. With this, we are done with all the true false not given questions. The location of the answers are on your screen. Here are some things to note. The answers are in order. That is, we get the answer to the first question first, then the second, then the third, and so on. The answers are far from each other over the whole passage, from the first to the last paragraph. This is unusual for true false not given questions. Usually, answers to these questions are close, found within 2 or 3 paragraphs. But this is not a rule, it is what we usually find. The answers being in order is a rule that we can depend upon. Even though the answers are far off, all the questions have keywords which helped us find the answers. Capitalized words, numbers, other words like weather, etc. Using these keywords, we can avoid reading the parts of the passage where there are no answers. In this case, we skipped some paragraphs. This helps save time during the reading test. So, important tips for true false not given questions are the answers follow the same order as information in the text. Look for location keywords like names, numbers, subheadings, etc. And skip irrelevant paragraphs by focusing on location clues. Now we start with Gap fill questions. The answers to the gap fill questions are in the same order as the information in the text. You'll find the exact word or words for the answer in the passage, and it is clearly mentioned how many words are allowed. So, in the questions that we are working on, we are only allowed one word answers. The strategy to solve these questions is attempting them one at a time because the answers are in order. We identify location keywords, find the tentative location of the answer in the passage, then understand the question carefully and read the relevant part of the passage closely. In this case, as we glance at the questions, we see that there are a lot of words and numbers which can help us locate the answers. Kilo, 14,000, animal, fishing, etc. Another important thing to note here is that any information that is there in the questions between two blanks will also be there in the passage between the two answers. So, between the 10th and the 11th answers, you will find a mention of obsidian. Similarly, between 11th and 12th answer, there will be a mention of hunting and fishing. This can help us skip the irrelevant parts of the passage and save time. Another thing that can help us figure out answers is if we understand the structure of the questions. These questions are in points. This mentions excavations revealed something, and then there are a list of things which were revealed in the excavations. And one of the points has two subpoints, these two. Then another part starts which mentions something about Obi Islanders 8,000 years ago, which also has 3 points. Most probably, these two parts of the question will have answers from different paragraphs. The eighth question has the capitalized word kilo, and after the eighth question, 14,000 years is mentioned. In the passage, kilo is mentioned for the first time in paragraph 3. The same paragraph also mentions 14,000 years. Now we have the tentative location of the eighth answer. Let's understand the question. The question says that there was excavation or digging of rock shelters inside something near Kilo. The paragraph says that in the village of Kilo, two caves were found, and these caves were used as rock shelters, or there were rock shelters in the caves. The answer is caves. I found this question a little confusing because of the way this sentence is worded in the passage. But caves containing rock shelters means rock shelters were inside the caves. One thing that really helped me find this answer was that I knew that the answer has to be before the mention of 14,000 years. So I focused only on these two sentences for the answer. So there were rock shelters inside caves. Inside these rock shelters, there were excavations. And one of the things that was found from these excavations were axes which were used for making canoes. The answer to the eighth question is caves. Moving on to the ninth question. This question mentions the number 11,700. In the passage, we found the answer to the eighth question in paragraph 3. Question 9 mentions axes, but axes are mentioned before this question as well. In the passage, we see axes are mentioned quite a bit in paragraph 3, but the number 11,700 is mentioned only in paragraph 5. Axes are mentioned here as well. So, the answer to the ninth question should be from paragraph 5. Dating from means coming from that time. So axes were made which were used around 11,700 years ago. What were these axes made of? In the paragraph, it says around 11,700 years ago, as the most recent ice age ended. Ice age is a period of extreme cold on Earth. There is a mention of what the climate was at this time, and then it says axes crafted from stone appear. That is, axes made from stone appear at this time, that is 11,700 years ago. The answer to the ninth question is stone. It is very important here that we understand that rather than seashells means instead of seashells. That is, the axes were not made of seashells, they were made of stone instead. We have read about axes made of seashell while doing the true false not given questions. Moving on to the 10th question, we are looking for something of an animal which is a proof of or an evidence of what the islanders ate. So, we are looking for a mention of an animal and some mention of the food that people ate at that time. This is where we found the answer to the previous question in the fifth paragraph. The sixth paragraph mentions a possum like creature, and the word hunted is mentioned, which could mean that people hunted and ate this creature. Possum is a small animal with a long tail that climbs trees and is active at night. Here it mentions another animal, Rothschild's cuscus, which is similar to possum. Researchers found evidence or unearthed evidence that people hunted this animal, Rothschild's cuscus. So, this is the animal which is mentioned in the question. The researchers found bones. From this, we can understand that the researchers found bones of this animal. The answer to the 10th question is bones. The researchers found bones of Rothschild's cuscus, and this was the evidence that people living at that time mainly hunted and ate this animal. The answer to the 10th question is bones. The 11th question is a second subpoint of this point. Evidence of travel between islands. The excavations gave some evidence of travel between islands. The first evidence was this. The second evidence has the blank. The words we can keep in mind when we try to locate the answer are travel, obsidian, maybe resembled. This is where we found the answer to the previous question. The next paragraph has the word obsidian, and traveled is also mentioned in this paragraph. According to this paragraph, in the excavation, two things were found: obsidian, which is a volcanic glass substance. It is a shiny black volcanic rock, which is not naturally found in OB, or in the passage it says there is no source of obsidian on OB. The second thing that is found starts from here. It, that is the excavation, also revealed beads. These beads are similar to those previously found on islands, or they resembled the beads which were found on other islands. And then in the last sentence in this paragraph, we have a mention of what is there before the two subpoints in the question. This is the evidence, or this is the support of the idea that people traveled to other islands. The answer to the 11th question is beads. Now we start with the 12th question. Before the 12th answer, the number 8,000 should be mentioned and hunting and fishing should be mentioned. This question has the word metal. In the passage, This is the answer to the previous question. The next paragraph mentions 8,000. Fishing and hunting is mentioned here as well. Most probably, the answer to the 12th question should be from the ninth paragraph because hunting and fishing is mentioned before the 12th question. The 12th question says that Obi Islanders had two things. The first thing we have to find out, and the second thing is items made out of metal. In the ninth paragraph, it says, when they were reoccupied by people, so they here is the Obi Island. So when the islands were reoccupied by people, these people owned or they had two things: pottery and things or items made out of gold and silver. The answer to the 12th question is pottery. The only difficult part here is that the word metal is not mentioned. This is something we are supposed to know, that gold and silver refer to metal. So, the Obi Islanders had two things: pottery and items made out of gold and silver. Moving on to the 13th question. The Obi Islanders took part in production and sale of something. This is where we found the answer to the previous question. We are already at the end of the passage. There is only one sentence left, which is what we'll focus on. This sentence says, it seems likely, that is, it is probable, that at this time, kilo shelters were used by people involved in trade of spices. The people here are the Obi Islanders. These people took part in or they were involved in sale of spices. The answer to the 13th question is spices. With this, we are done with all the gap fill questions. On your screen are the locations of the answers in the passage on one side and the questions on the other side. What is noteworthy here is that the answers are in order. The exact words that we put into the blank are found in the passage. We do not need to change the words in any way. We need to be careful that little mistakes like writing spice instead of spices or stones instead of stone will make the answers incorrect. When looking for answers, it helped that we focused on capitalized words, numbers, words like obsidian to locate the answers in the passage. Because of this, we can avoid reading some parts of the passage and save time. With this, we are done with all the questions of this passage. I'll post solutions of the next passage of this test in my next video. Hope this helped you. All the very best.